Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is Tian Connaughton. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Well, we met over Instagram. We connected there, and I was going through your page, and I noticed right away that it's all about community building. It's all about empowering other people, about like sharing your knowledge. Tell me, why is it important to you?
For me, being inclusive is very important. As a Black woman, as an immigrant, as a fat woman, when I started out knitting and crocheting, I didn't see folks that looked like me. I bought a lot of books, I bought a lot of magazines, I was going through patterns after patterns, and I didn't really see myself reflected, not just in my skin tone, but like my size. So when I was laid off from my corporate job in 2012, and I decided I'm going to go all in this fiber designing thing, I wanted to make a difference. I made a conscious decision that I'm going to try as best as I can to include as many folks as that is like me. Because my motto, if you get any of my emails or see a lot of my posts, you'll see my motto is a rising tide lifts all boats. And that what that means for me is that if I'm going to grow and I'm going to reach the top of that mountain, if I'm going to keep rising to the top, it's no fun up there all by yourself. So I'm going to bring all my friends, all the people that I want to play with up there, right? And have a party at the top. So it's not just me up there all by myself and looking down, but it's me like sending that ladder back and saying, hey, come on, let's do this. And I hope that I'm glad that you saw that in my Instagram, because that's a conscious decision that I've made to make sure that it's not just about me.
Right.
It's about bringing a lot of people with me as much as possible.
Well, tell me a bit about yourself. Like, when did you learn how to knit or crochet? Like, tell me your story.
Okay, so I used to be so jealous of the folks who were like, oh, I learned to knit and crochet at my grandmother's knees. And I didn't have that, right? I learned to crochet from a coworker back in 2001. I had just gotten married. We'd come back from our honeymoon and we had this new employee that was like knitting and crocheting. I'm like, okay, that looks cool, right? So she taught me how to crochet. And for many years, I was just like, so glad, just crocheting anything, square, rectangles. That was it. My mother-in-law, who knits, always, like, come on, get over to the dark side, come knit. And I'm like, 2 sticks, I'm good with my 1 hook, right? So for a long time, I resisted that 2 needle thing because that's scary if you're a crocheter. But I was, my son was about 2 in about 2006, and I quit my job in corporate that time just to be a stay-at-home mom, be home, do that parenting thing. It was boring as heck. And I was watching Home and Garden channel, and Nitty Gritty would come on every day, and I would see them knitting. And I was like, oh, that's pretty. That's different than the stuff I was making as a crocheter. As a crocheter, I was making blanket, bulky stuff. But with knitting, they were making this fine, detailed things like sweaters. And finally, my mother-in-law was like, yes, we brought her over to the dark side, and I got hooked. And it was watching that show that made me realize, like, oh, this is fun. But what really got me into designing was seeing a Black woman on that show. It was Shirley Payton. I saw her and I was like, wait a minute, I've never seen this before. She could be like a big sister. She could be an aunt. And I was like, if she can do it, I can do it. And after I saw her, I was just like, off to the races. I was like, I'm going to be her. I'm going to do whatever she's doing. I'm going to be a knitter. I'm going to be a crocheter and like designer. And she gave me that inspiration. And since then, I went back to corporate. And then 2012, I was laid off and I was like, that's it. I'm not going back. I'm going to pursue this as a full-time career, as a designer, tech editor. And now I teach others to do what I do.
Was it difficult for you to learn how to knit with the 2 needles after being a crocheter?
Those 2 sticks are scary, man. It's just like, how do you hold it? And I was trying to use my crochet brain to apply that same holding technique to the knitting, and it didn't work. But eventually, I learned. I had my mother-in-law who I would go to, and she was like, oh, you cast on like this, you bind off like that. So I had hands-on help. But like I said, my son was 2 at the time. We were going to mommy times at the library. So while he would be doing that, I'd go over to the craft section, and I would come out with like bundles of books, like so many books on like knit this bag, crochet this. And I really learned that way by like looking through books and seeing what other people were doing and how they were holding their hooks and things like that. Because YouTube wasn't as big of a thing back then. So right. It was mostly books and looking at, okay, this picture says to put the hook here or the needle here, I'm going to do it. And that's pretty much how I got into it and really like learned for myself.
Well, you know what scares me? Like you were scared of 2 needles. I'm like terrified of tech editing. I don't even understand how you can like look at the pattern and mind
visualize.
You, I test knitted last year alone like over 20 patterns. So I do test knitting all the time, right? And with all that, it still sort of doesn't register in my brain how you can, without knitting, just look at the pattern, read through it, find all the mistakes, make all the sure that the math works. So I have like my hat is off to you for
well, if you want to talk about that offline sometime, let me know, because it's like it's a mental thing that you have to kind of like imagine how each stitch is going. And for me, I graph out, right? I draw a little hand chart of the pattern to really understand what they're doing, especially with crochet, where you can put the hook literally anywhere in the crochet stitch. Knitting is a little easier to tech edit, but if you want to talk offline, let me know. I am like, I love this stuff.
But tell me how you learned that. Was that also from books?
Well, I have a background in like, in my corporate days, I was writing like training manuals for new employees that were coming into my department. So I had that mindset of like, okay, this is how it's done, but how do I make it step by step for others? And I think that helped me to become a designer, and using my designer brain really helped me to be a tech editor. Because as a designer, I can imagine the stitches, what it's going to look like. And it's the same when I'm reading a pattern to understand what it's going to look like as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
and not to say that you have to be a designer to be a tech editor. I just mean for me, it just made the process so much easier to like visualize each step, each stitch building on each other.
Well, you mentioned that there is like, especially back then, size inclusivity was very questionable, if non-existent. Like if you look at the old magazines, it all ends at size large. Like there is nothing above that. Do you think people like you, people who represent like all the different sizes, do you think it's like it empowers us to be this inclusive community because we all different sizes and shapes? Like I find also like a lot of sweaters that supposed to fit me size-wise don't fit me because of how I'm built, right?
And I think for a lot of us that are not, the standard size, because that's what patterns are. If you go to the Craft Yarn Council's website, which has the sizing chart, those are standard size. And a lot of us aren't like 5'5" or 5'7" who are very small. So it's very empowering to see a pattern that is size inclusive, but to also have the knowledge of how to modify things to fit us exactly the way we want. Because even though a pattern might be, a 48-inch chest and, the measurements are correct for the arms and the sleeve and things like that, your particular body might have something that needs adjusting. And that's not to say it's anything good or bad about it. It's just the way our bodies are, right? Somebody who is a 48-inch chest might have wider hips where I might not have wider hips. So now I have to figure out how to adjust that to fit me the way I want. And that's not to say I'm going to rewrite a pattern to be size inclusive. No. Those patterns come size inclusively graded already. I'm just making those tweaks to fit me, the body I'm in right now.
So let's talk about that, because recently you published Cardigans for Every Body.
Yes.
Tell me how you came up with this idea and how did you approach that?
So I don't know if you're familiar with a book out there. It's like Pilates or yoga for everyone or something like that. And that was a sort of spin I was trying to give this book. And it's not just for everybody, but it's for everybody, right? Two separate words, intentional. And the point of the book is not to just give you a bunch of patterns that you can just like pick a size and work through and knit your size. And we've seen those. Those are out there. I wanted to create a resource that has some patterns, but the main gist of the book is to give you resources so that you can make it fit you the way you want. So you might come across a free pattern or a paid pattern. I don't care where you get the pattern, as long as it's ethically sourced, of course. But you might come across a pattern and it's like, oh, I love that cable, but I don't like the length. Or I don't like that it's a cardigan. I want to make it a pullover. Just by using a swatch, a nice sizable swatch, not that 2 stitches over 5 rows still on the needles kind of thing, but a nice sizable swatch, you can use your measurement and adjust the yarn. You can change up the yarn completely. You can make adjustments to the patterns to fit you, like, oh, I want long sleeve versus short sleeve. I want the body longer versus shorter, right? Just by doing those simple things that I talk about in the book, you can make adjustments to anyone. And the best thing is that throughout the book, there are maths involved, right? I'm showing you calculations. I'm showing you like, okay, if you want to get this number, this is what you need to do and do this, and you get the number. And I wanted to show also like, what does those numbers mean, right? So in each equation, I'll show you, this is the stitches per gauge. This is where you get the numbers, and this is where it's going to go.
Well,
right?
Let's talk about that scary word, swatch. What is a sizable swatch? What would satisfy you in the size of the swatch? And what information are you looking to gain from the swatch?
So when I first started knitting and crocheting, back when I used to commute all the way to Hartford, I'm in Massachusetts, so that was like an hour and a half commute one way. I would listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of knitters, crocheters talking about their swatch, and I would hear them say, "My swatch lied," and I thought, oh, well, why even bother swatching? So for years, I was hearing that swatches lie, don't even bother. But as I did more research over the last few years, I've come to realize like the reason a lot of folks' swatches were lying is because their swatch was too small. They were just like these little things. For me, a swatch that's big enough is at least a 6x6, because I want to measure 4 inches and have like a big enough area around it to not measure the edge. So at least a 6x6. 8x8 would be great, right? And then also is finishing that swatch according to the manufacturer's instructions. So if it's a cotton, well, how are you going to finish it? Are you going to steam block it? Are you going to wet block it? How are you going to finish it? And then it's not like taking it off the needles and the hooks and immediately measure it, but giving it some time to rest. Because remember, as you're pulling on those stitches, as you're wrapping it around the hook, wrapping it around the needle, you're putting tension on that yarn. So give it time to like relax and get back into like, this regular setting before you even block. And what I do is I do a measurement of my gauge swatch before I block. So after it's rested and done its little thing overnight, I measure it, I weigh it. And then after I blocked it, I do it again. And why do I do that? I want to know if there's any change. For example, superwash, that sucker will stretch all the way if you let it. But how much will it stretch? In what direction, right? So I want to make sure if I'm making a sweater out of cotton, that if I cut off at like my hips, when I wear it, it's not going to be down to my knees and become a dress. So I need to know, is it going to stretch a lot? By what percentage? So I know where to stop on my garment. So I have that finish that I want. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you offer a free video course called Get Published.
Yes.
How was it to be published yourself? Like, was it more difficult because it's you? Like, and you in theory know everything, but to apply those advices that you give to others, like, is it different for yourself?
I don't know everything. I started designing way before I knew anything. So all the stuff that I'm telling you now, I didn't know it when I first came published. I was being very silly back then. But I wrote this book around, COVID, not the book, but I wrote the course around COVID time because I wanted to see more folks that looked like me not only on the pages, because, during 2020, 21, we were talking about getting more diversity on the pages, models, things like that. And that was great. But I want to see more of us behind the scenes as tech editors and designers. So when I wrote this course, I wanted to show you the step-by-step process, not what I went through in the beginning. I talk about that in the course of all the embarrassing stuff, all the mistakes I made, so you don't make them. But I show you also how to simplify the process so you get more yeses when you reach out to like a yarn company or a magazine and send out your proposal. And I interview designers who are just starting and those who are experienced. I also talk to publishers also who are, so gracious with their time to be interviewed, where they share with me what they're looking for on the back end, right? So they're not looking at a proposal and saying, oh, this is a Black person or this is a white person, I'm going to bring them in. They're looking at the content of the proposal. But what I'm doing is saying, because I want to see more folks of diverse background, I want you to have the same playing field. So you have all the information so that you can say, hey, I know exactly what they're looking for and I can go send them my proposal out as well. So I'm opening up the field. And hopefully more folks will take advantage of it. I haven't talked about it a lot, so I'm really grateful that you brought it up. And again, it's a free course. It's 6 parts. There's a lot of interviews. There's a lot of conversations. There's so much value in there.
Right. Do people thank you for what you do?
I think so. I do get some DMs. I do get some emails. I try not to let that get in my head, because I think I could get a big head. I'm like, oh, well, and I don't want to get that way. I want to still be grounded enough to okay, this is the path that I want to go on, and I'm going to go at this path. A rising tide lifts all boats. I want to follow that motto and not get overwhelmed by people saying, oh, you're amazing or whatever. I just want to put my blinders on and do the work that I think I was made to do. So yeah, I do get some thanks, but I love it.
One of the things that I had to actually share with a friend of mine from your Instagram was your post about how to get yes, and that you have to go through 100 no's, right? And I think people don't talk about it enough. And I always try to bring it up on my channel that when we see somebody succeed in this field, right, or any field, we assuming that they got lucky, they were in the right time and the right place. We don't see the actual path. We don't know how much rejection they had to deal with to get to where they are. And that comes in every field of life. You can hear about actors who super famous now when they talk about their story, how they used to wait tables, right? So it's in every field, every place, in every profession. Why was it important for you to share that with your audience?
So I think I share this all the time. I share it also in the Get Published course. I talk about getting rejected as one of the lessons in that course. But I was sharing this particular challenge on my other site, Tian Connaughton Instagram page. That's my business side, where I talk to folks who want to become designers, tech editors, and things like that. And I wanted to share, if you put yourself in this mind frame, and let me take a step back. This is a 100 rejection challenge, right? The goal is to get 100 rejection. So logically, you're thinking, if I need to get 100 rejection, I got to at least make 100 ask. And if all of them get rejected, okay. But chances are not all of your asks are going to be a no. So for me, I wanted to share this challenge because we ran it in my group, Pattern Partnership, last year. And so many folks were like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get a ton of no's and it's fine. And what we learned is that folks who ask don't get as many no's as they think. So in the back of your head, you're like, oh, I don't want to ask that person for this thing because they're going to say no. But this challenge proved if you actually ask, chances are they're not going to say no. But if you don't ask, they're already saying no because you didn't put the ask out there. So the challenge is, can you get 100 no's? And so far, I've done about 6 or 7 asks since I posted that, and they've all been yes. and you were one of them, right? So it was like, if I make the ask with the intent that I'm going to get rejected and not put any personal feelings on it, like, oh, I'm not good enough or whatever, it's just a no. If I just go into it with that mindset, then it's not that bad. Make a list of 10 people you want to reach out to. What do you want to ask them for? You send one out, get a response. If they say no, then look at what did you ask and see if it was a win-win relationship kind of thing that you're asking for. If it was like very me-centered, then rework it and then go ask the next person on your list. When they respond, again, check to see, was it me? Everything was like, could you do this for me? Could you do this for me? Or could it be like, oh, I want to do this to help you as well, right? So it's a win-win for both of us. So if you go into it with those kind of mindset, which I talk about inside my membership all the time, a lot of what we do here is about mindset, right? You have to think about what's in it for the other person. Collaboration, it's not competition. And making those tough asks that a lot of folks aren't going to do because they're scared, rightfully scared.
Right.
You're just
I mean, I do it myself all the time also, because like every time I'm trying to connect with somebody, asking them to be interviewed on my channel, there is a very high probability that they're gonna ignore me. They're not gonna even see my DM, or they're gonna think like, who the heck is this girl and why should I even talk to her, right? So that fear is always present. Yeah. And I remember like when I just first started, I had like one morning, I woke up, I only did 5 interviews at that time. And I woke up and I thought, I want to ask Hazel Tyndall to be interviewed by me. Mind you, I never exchanged one word with Hazel Tyndall. I just loved her from afar, right? I just wanted to know the story of that lady. So I woke up and I was like, you know what? She's just going to ignore me. So what? And I wrote to her a letter and I said, dear Miss Tyndall, I would absolutely love to chat with you and, see if you're going to agree to this interview. And because I've been a long time huge fan of yours and I would love to get to know you better. And she wrote back to me and she was like, oh, I'm a huge fan of your lace. Yeah, like absolutely. And I was like, oh my God, Hazel Tyndall knows me. She knows of my existence, right? And it's oftentimes like, I mean, did I get rejections in the 228 interviews that I posted? I mean, you bet there were like another 200 people who like didn't respond or just said like, I'm too busy and it's not for me. I'm too shy. I don't want to be on any kind of thing. It's like it happened. But then I had 228 people who said yes, so it's definitely like, I'm a firm believer that what you're doing is empowering people.
Yeah. And imagine if you hadn't made that first ask, where would you be right now? Right. And I always think about that too for myself. Like, if I didn't do this thing, where am I going to be tomorrow? And is it going to be a better place or is it not? And I'd rather get that no and say, I tried, than to like, I wish I had. I don't like that feeling.
Tell my viewers more about what services do you offer? What kind of memberships do you offer and how they can benefit from that?
So I do designs. You can find my patterns. You can find my book. It's available on Amazon and on my website in PDF, ebook, and paperback. I also tech edit. I don't do a lot of tech edit for folks outside of my membership. I've mentioned my membership, which is called Pattern Partnership. That's for mainly designers, knit and crocheters who want to learn how to become a successful designer, to make money at this thing that we all love to do. Because we have a lot of designers out there who are just like doing all the things and they're not making any money. And my philosophy is, you can make a living doing this. I'm proof. I've been doing this since 2012. So that's 11 years full-time as a designer, tech editor, business owner. So those are the main services I offer. If you're a designer, if any of your audience is a designer and they're like, I would like to figure out how to build this thing as a business and not so much as a hobby, come talk to me. Let's have a conversation. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Let's just have a conversation about what is possible. And if you follow my story, you know that, Black woman, immigrant, overweight, we are not the standard for what success look like. And I'm trying to change that narrative.
I mean, I think it's brilliant because, we all have our own things that we like unsure of. The imposter syndrome is definitely a real thing. We all think, why me? Like, what do I have to offer to the world that it doesn't know already, right? But every experience is a valid experience, and every path is unique. And sometimes a lot of people sitting on the sideline and they thinking, well, it's just like, it's not for people like me. So seeing people like yourself, seeing people who like brave it, right, and try it and succeed in it, it's very inspiring.
Yeah, for a long time, I didn't show my face. On my Instagram profile way back in the day, it used to be the same profile I had on my Ravelry, was a cat. It's like, I never showed my face, and I never wanted to speak because I have an accent. I kind of don't sound as American. So I had all those things in my mind. But once I started seeing more folks who looked like me, talk like me, who were just like not the standard, then I was like, oh, well, I guess there is room for me too to tell my story. And from telling my story, I'm hearing from folks like, yes, I feel exactly like that. I finally feel like I'm not seen as a fat person or a Black person or whatever person. So sharing my story is really resonating with folks who felt like they were invisible. And that's my goal, is to like, if I'm going to embarrass myself, I want it to be for the good of somebody else, seeing like, you can embarrass yourself and that won't break you. One mistake, one little thing shouldn't break you.
Well,
right?
let me ask you about that. Let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
You said you were uncomfortable talking about your size or putting your face out there. Did you get comfortable with it now, or are you fighting it every time? Do you feel like you embraced yourself? Did you learn to love yourself through this process?
I think it's a daily thing that I have to like go through every time I pick up my phone and like take a photo of myself. It's like, you again? Right? That mindset again, where I have to like tell myself, like, I don't love myself every day, but some days I am like really in love with myself. And some days I'm just like, meh. But it's a mental thing where I have to remind myself that what I'm doing is valuable. I'm worthy. Whatever I look like, whatever I feel like, if I have my hair up or down or whatever, whatever body I'm in right now is worthy. And I have to tell myself that all the time, because some days it feels great to just get up and like, all right, I'm going to do a reel. And some days it's like, oh, I should do a reel. I should show my face. I should.
I mean, and the reason I'm asking, because I go through the same exact thing, right? And I remember when I was first starting the channel, I talked to a friend of mine, Steven Weber. He was a guest of my channel. If you guys haven't watched that interview, highly recommend. He's like one of the most watched people on my channel for a good reason. He's like very funny and charming. But I remember talking to him, and he's an English teacher in a school in New York. And I was telling him, Steven, like, it's not my first language. I make grammatical mistakes. I know it as soon as I say something that it was like wrong. I have accent. I don't look like anybody. Should I even try it? Like, or is it part of the charm? And he's like, it's absolutely part of the charm. Just do it. And if not for people like that who encourage us along the way, it would be more difficult. So I think what you're doing is brilliant in that sense, because you telling other people, like, I'm not like everybody else. I struggle with myself every day, but then I still go and I still try and I still put myself out there. And I tell it to a lot of people that they would ask me, it's like, I'm trying to grow on Instagram, but I don't know. I post about my, the designs, and it just doesn't grow. And every time I ask, but do you post that pattern, wearing that pattern on yourself, right? Do you post yourself? Do people know anything about you? And they would be like, nah, like, I'm not the model. Like, I'm not the one who is modeling.
Yeah. And I get that. Like I said, I have a membership for designers that I work with on this very topic, because they come into the program and they're thinking, my pattern should speak for itself. And yeah, on the surface, that sounds great. But there are so many folks out there who are making shawls and sweaters, and like, what's going to differentiate you from them? And if I can see you speaking, that makes me connect so much quicker. And it's not like I'm judging you like, oh, you have an accent or you don't have an accent, but I can hear like how you sound when you're happy, how you sound when you're kind of sad, and that kind of make me connect more. And if more folks would just realize, like, we're not here to judge you. Of course, there's going to be people that judge you. Of course, forget about them. They're not your audience. But if you're just going to go in there with the mindset of like, I have something to share with my audience, there's somebody out here who needs to hear this message. If you go into it with that mindset, then I think it's easier for you to show up and not be like so internalized about, oh, well, how do I look? Or yeah, we care about how we look, but if you're just focusing on the message and the audience, I think that gets a little bit easier for you to show up. And that's what I think about when I'm like, oh no, I don't want to show my face today. Then I look at my notes and I'm like, well, my message is to so-and-so, my ideal audience. I'm going to talk to her because she needs to hear this. And if I'm feeling this way, gosh darn it, she's feeling the exact same way. So why not just take myself out of the equation and serve her or him or them?
Well, one of the fun things I've done on my channel is I created like a mini series of whenever like I'm participating in Mystery Knit Along or Knit Along, or even with my own audience, I created this mini series that I called Humans of something, right? Humans of this MCAL, Humans of Fiberchats. And I invited knitters, like regular people, just like you and me, not designers, not famous, yarn dyers, but like anybody who participated in any of those events. I did the open invitation and we did mini interviews. And a lot of time people would be so shy at the beginning and they're like, I'm nobody. I'm just, But what we learn is everybody has a story and every story is like very unique. And when you combine them into compilation of like 5-6 people sharing their stories and sharing their level of experience, it's becoming very interesting for everyone to watch because they can relate with somebody, right? So one person can be extremely experienced knitter and they'll tell you how it took them half an hour to go through the whole clue. And another person would be saying, this is my first time knitting brioche and I'm totally lost and I already undid this 17 times and I'm still trying, I'm not giving up, or maybe I should give up. But like the support that these people get and this, connection, because like I'm getting all the comments and guys, like, I love your comments. Like the comments is what makes this channel so great. Like this is my favorite part, right? But people can connect with uncertainty and that we all going through the same process together. And I think like this is part of what you do also, when you show yourself, when you show how you adjust the pattern to your body type, right? It gives this bravery, it gives this, allows others to say, well, she changes it around, she makes it look good on herself, right? Like she's not the standard body type. So I should do the same. Like maybe I can make it longer, shorter, wider, sleeve, something, to fit me better. So I think it's very empowering to show yourself.
Yeah. And when you mentioned that, those folks came in and they're like, I'm nobody, or I don't feel like I have a story. That's very painful because I remember thinking that I still think like that sometimes. I just have to like talk myself out of it. But to hear folks saying I'm nobody or I don't have a story, it's like people think that, with Instagram and social media, you have to have this grand story. Like I have all these tattoos and I'm like, you don't have to be so grandiose. You can just be like, I just made this thing and that's a story. Your story doesn't have to be like this monumental thing of this great overcoming that you've done. And I think when people are like, well, I don't have a story, they're thinking, well, the little thing I just did, I just made that brioche. That's not big enough. And let's just be real. Whatever the thing you accomplished today, getting out of bed, that's a big accomplishment.
Right.
Going for a walk taking pictures of your feet, taking pictures of your socks. So that is a big deal. That's a story. It doesn't have to be like overcoming, like being fired, or it doesn't have to be that big. Your
And you know
story is
what's
worth telling.
interesting, like if you look at my channel, like a lot of people that like some of my favorite interviews on this channel are people who have like 200 followers on Instagram, but they are like brilliant fiber artists. They just not about posting and sharing and like putting themselves out there necessarily. But when you start talking to them, they have amazing story and they know things that like I don't know and I never even heard of, right? And it's like it's my favorite thing, like to talk to people from all different parts of the world, all different backgrounds, and just get to know their story, because it's just, this is what makes this world so beautiful, to have this fabric of our lives.
Exactly. And I think a lot of those folks are just like, well, my story is so small. It's not that big of a deal. But if you can just shift your mindset and like, this story might not be grand, but it's still worth telling, and tell it often, then it's so worth it. Like a few years ago when KnitStar came to me and like, oh, could you teach for one of our classes? I was like, I don't have that many followers. I'm like, why would you want me? Right. And it was just like me like telling myself no. But as I was working on the course, my story became stronger because I started like relating what I was talking about to like my ideal audience, the folks who would be watching. And I think if we could just sit down and like, this is my message, this is my story, and figure out how it relates to someone out there in the world, and just keep talking about that story. You're going to see me talk about size and fat and being Black and being a woman. You're going to see me talk about those core things all the time because that's my message. That's my story. I can't tell you about growing up in Europe. I can't tell you about being blonde. I can't tell you about those things, but I can tell you my story, and hopefully who it's meant for will receive it.
Well, when you think about back to 2001, right? Like when you're thinking about back to you learning how to crochet and learning how to knit and how far you came today, are you impressed with yourself? Are you pleased with yourself?
The younger me wouldn't be impressed with myself, but now that I'm in my 40s, I'm impressed just by going up the stairs. And I'm impressed with anything I do. But seriously, yeah, I figure, let me back up. Well, when I started, I never thought this is where I'd go. I was always meant for corporate. I was meant for finance. That's it. This crafted things, those are for grannies, right? I have an older sister who used to crochet, and I used to like, what is she doing? That's old people stuff. And I would make fun of her all the time. All through high school, I would make fun of her because she was a nurse and she would work with older folks and she would sit and knit with them. And I was just like, that's not for me. I'm going to corporate. I'm going to be somebody. So embarrassing to say that now. But looking back at the little jerk that I was back then and seeing what I've accomplished, and it's like, it's not corporate, but it's so much fulfilling. It's so much better than what I was doing before. Numbers on the computer, that don't mean nothing. That won't change the world. But to show myself and where I've been and the mistakes I've made and having these conversations, that's changing the world. Right? It's not making millions like I could have been making by now in corporate, but I think I'm changing enough lives that it's worth more than money. I can get up every day and I can say, hey, I did something. I didn't transfer a lot of money for some corporate person. No, but I did talk to a woman who, for the first time, using the strategies in my book, was able to make her first sweater that fit her.
It's right? Also like back to the definition of success, right? Like we live in the world where success is being equated to money. And
capitalism, it's real.
Right. But the reality of it, there is like so many different ways to feel successful, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you change something for the better, you are successful at that. If you affect people positively, you are successful at that. Like if you became the best version of yourself, you are successful. So it's like we also have to have this kindness. We're often kind to others and we're so critical of ourselves, right?
But it's so easy to be kind to others than we are to ourselves, because I could be nice to you all day, but after we're done with this, I'm going to go like, I should have said that differently. I should have, right? And it's, we want to make money, because I can't take my knit into the bank and like, okay, I'm going to give you 2 sweaters to pay my mortgage. No, they're not going to take sweaters or
right.
likes on Instagram for payment. I need the money because our system is set up for that. But if along the way I can be making a significant difference in somebody's life, even if it's just one person, for me, that's success. Money is, I need money to kind of live, which I hate to say, but I don't need money to be happy. It helps, right? I can pay my medical bills. I can live in this beautiful house or whatever. But every day when I get up, I'm wondering about my ideal audience. I call her Rebecca. And I think about, what does Rebecca need from me today? Does she need me to talk about how much money I made today? No. She needs to see that I'm wearing a sweater I made that fit me the way I wanted to fit. And I feel amazing. I can go into a boardroom meeting. I could go do whatever I want.
Well,
right? I'm going to a meeting later and I'm wearing this sweater and I'm going to be like a boss. I go in.
Where do you see yourself continuing with this business? Like, do you have a vision? Do you have a business plan of where it's going?
The vision is, well, with COVID, I can't really plan too far ahead. So I try to plan like very generally. So the vision is to continue to design, maybe not as much. I would like to write another book, a fiction book, novel. That's a goal. Don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I would love to do that. I would love to like grow my membership pattern partnership to show more designers that this is possible, that you can actually make a living with just a few simple tweaks to your business. I want to grow like more designers, not just in my program, but I want more folks to go through the Get Published course and just get that knowledge, learn from publishers, learn from other designers to see what's possible. I want to see more people take risk. So I'm going to show up and take more risk. Right. So it's like, that's the overarching future for me, is to continue to do more of what I'm doing in a grander way.
Right. Well, I'm gonna be there watching your journey for sure. And I'm so glad you reached out, because I love what you do. I'm like, I think it's very important. And if you want to invite your members to, I told you about the group that David Van de Kamp and I organized on Facebook called Knitters Gonna Knit. We actually created that group specifically to help designers, young dyers, to promote their business. So that would be a great resource for them to post test calls or announce their new patterns. So I invite all of your members to join us as well there.
Oh. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. When one of my members from Pattern Partnership reached out to me and said, hey, you got to go talk to this woman. I'm like, really? So you have to thank Crazy Cats, Crazy Knits.
Thank you, Crazy Knits.
Yeah, she's the one who's like, you have to go talk to Irina. And I'm like, I don't know. She has so many followers. Maybe she won't. And then I remember, I'm doing this 100 rejection challenge. If she's my first no, oh, well. And you weren't. So I'm so glad. I'm so thankful that you said yes and that we can have this conversation. When I watch your videos, I went back through the archives and I was watching your videos and I'm like, we could be friends. And that was like the reason I reached out, because I want to talk to folks that I think I could be friends with.
That's actually like my favorite thing about this channel, because I made so many friends in all different parts of the world. And funny side story, I'm going with my family to this summer to Israel and to Portugal. And I reached out to Inbal Gross. She was a guest of my channel. She's from Israel. And I was like, I'm going to be in Israel those dates. And she was like, can I organize meet and greet with other knitters to see you? And I was like, I don't think anybody else knows me there, but sure. So we're doing meet and greet in Israel. And then I'm going to Portugal and I'm going to be in 2 different cities there. I'm going to be in Porto. And I talked to a knitwear designer, and he is instructor at Vogue Knitting. Andre, and he really lives in Porto. And I was like, "Are you gonna be in Porto?" And he's like, "Yes, let's do interview then." And then I talked to another guest of Fiberchats who lives near Lisbon, and she was like, "Come, stay with us, and let's meet. Let's go." So it's so lovely to have these friendships develop through my channel, to meet all these wonderful folks. So I hope I'm gonna run into you somewhere, and we
I
can.
hope so. I'll be at SSK next month teaching in Nashville. So if anyone is in the Nashville area, come on over. I'm in Massachusetts, like you are. Reach out. It's a small state, so we can meet up pretty much anywhere.
Sure, yeah, that would be fun. Like, yeah, we're definitely meeting at some point.
If you're ever going to Webb's, just let me know. Pick me up in Sturbridge. I know you did an interview in Sturbridge. I'm near Sturbridge. Pick me up. We can go to Webb's together.
That sounds like a good plan. Well, thank you so much, Tian. Thank you for being my guest today. I love chatting with you. I loved hearing your story, and I think you're doing wonderful things.
Thank you so much. So are you. And I really appreciate you saying yes to my request.